Hello everyone, thanks for joining this webinar. I'm Kevin, so I have 6 years of ESD experience. So today I'm gonna share you some of my experience in terms of navigating early stage planning to achieve the best sustainable outcomes. So this is part 2. We had some discussion about this in the previous week, and now we will continue to talk about some topics which I hope you will enjoy this webinar. Okay, first, introduction to SDAPP. So sustainable design assessment in the planning process is a scheme in Victoria where proposed developments will be reviewed for sustainable design considerations as part of the application for a planning permit. So here we know that if you have a project for planning application, sustainable design assessment is something you must have done with your planning permit. And it started in 2004 as early as grassroots effort just in few councils, and later all its councils formed the Caspi Council. So there are some reports we need to do for the planning application, and there are 3 main sustainable design reports, which are SMP report, Sustainable Management Plan, and Sustainable Design Assessment, which is SDA, and for the City of Melbourne, we need to do the ESD statement. Sometimes the council may require other reports. There are Waste Management Plan, Green Travel Plan, and the Water Sensitive Urban Design Report. So a typical SDAPP process can be very complicated. As you can see in this figure, there will be going back and forth with councils, with architects, and sometimes even with engineers. But we have a key point to make all this process simple. Let's say, engage sustainable design early. So for sustainable design assessment, we have 2 benchmark assessment tools. One is BESS, another one is Green Star. So BESS is more suitable for town planning and with like medium to small scale projects. Green Star is more suitable for large scale projects. As you can see, they have pretty much the same categories, and the things assessed are pretty much the same. So BESS, as we all know, BESS was purpose-built to support SDAPP steps, so it strongly aligned with all the ESD policy objectives in the Council. And it is very good to use the BESS assessment tool for residential and mixed-use projects. Also, BESS, it has tooltips which will include lots of design guidance and help you go through all the design process. The only thing about BESS is sometimes maybe it's tricky to use BESS for some non-residential building types, which I will come back to it later. And for Green Star design is built as quality assurance when it's used and intended. So it is designed for design stage through to operations, so it covers all the stages of your projects. And the most common projects for Green Star rating is office and commercial projects. Because it's more like based on design and as built, so it's nothing close to a design tool. It's more like a rating tool. And when it's used for SDAPP, we need to demonstrate the alignments with all the ESD objects in the consoles, which means there will be another extra work involved. So for BESS, there are some key categories. So last week we have discussed about the stormwater, IQ, and now today we're gonna continue to discuss about energy and water in this seminar. First of all, let's go to the energy part. So what are Council's requirements and policy objectives? And what do NC 2019 changes mean for energy? And what we could do to achieve best outcomes. So here, as you can see in the right-hand side, it shows like 92% of coal-fueled electricity generations is in Victoria as high carbon emissions. So like most things the council concern is we need to reduce the carbon emission. So council's requirements and policy objectives. It aims to improve the efficiency use of energy by ensuring all development demonstrate design potential for ESD objectives and the planning stage. And the key point here is by good passive design. And it needs to reduce total operation green gas emissions and also reduce energy peak demand. There's a figure on the right hand side. It shows like for most like typical energy consumption in homes. As you can see there, most of the energy consumption is by heating and cooling. So if we have a good passive design house, then we can reduce lots of heating and cooling load, which means we can reduce lots of greenhouse gas emissions. And please remember here for BESS, we need to achieve more than 50% score to comply with the requirements here. So what do the NCC 2019 changes mean for energy? So for residential part, for class 1, it's the same for the minimum 6-star energy rating, and for class 2 and other, it's also same, which means average above 6-star, and for each apartment, the minimum rating is 5 stars. But here is something new in NCC 2019. NCC 2019 introduced the new cooling and heating load limits, which means in terms of design, you should be very careful with all your glazing and wall ratios, and as it will impact a lot on the cooling load. And this is something which we didn't take into consideration in the NCC 2016. And for commercial, what's the difference? So I just checked with the BESS website, and right now it has been updated to NCC 2019. So generally, NCC 2019 will require like 60 to 40 improvement over the old NCC 2016. So here we should use more like good design, passive design, and good insulation and glazing to achieve all these improvements. So for building energy section compliance, there are two pathways. One is DTS pathway deemed to satisfy. So for DTS pathways, each building fabric elements like walls, roofs, glazings, floors will be required to comply with listed criteria. So for DTS assessment, it's much quicker and cheaper assessment, but traditionally it will come with higher building cost. Another pathway is JV3. So for JV3, we will model the proposed building and the reference building and compare the energy use between these two buildings. So if the proposed building uses less energy than the reference building, then it will comply with the requirements. So for JV3 modeling pathway, it comes with like more accuracy and higher assessment cost. But it will also benefit us back with a cheaper build cost. So as you can see with this table, there's like a simple comparison between the DTS pathway and the JV3 pathway. So you can see for glazing for DTS, we must assess like for each facade, and the high performance values will be used for large glazing areas. And for slab, like small slabs should be also insulated, and higher wall insulation and spandrel will be needed. But for JV3 modeling, it's more like we will assess the building as a whole, and then we can compare it with the reference building. So the benefits of doing JV3 is when we are doing JV3, we will have the building model, then like it will be easier for us if we need to do daylight modeling. Oh, also one thing to mention. So the key point here is for both DTS and JV3, we need to have a very good balance between glazing, SHGC, and the natural light requirements. This is one example about wall and glazing ratio. So window and wall ratio has a very dramatic impact on compliance. So as you can see on the figure 3, when it's fully glazed facade with no shading will require a SHGC of less than 0.13. So what does this 0.13 means? So for SUHO, usually if it's less than 0.3, it's mostly a very dark glass. So for this value, it's like there's no point of like light coming through this window. Therefore, a reduction in glazing and also increased shading device or insulated spandrels will be very important to help us achieve a good understanding, good design. And for class 3, 9C or 9A wall area, an area weighted U value of 0.2 will be required. For other glasses, it will be U value of 2. Which is also very high requirements in terms of glazing. Okay, then as we can see from NCC 2016 to 19, there's a lot of like stricter requirements. So how we could do to achieve the best outcome. The first thing is, as usual, a concept stage sustainable design feedbacks is very important. It will help us to avoid costly design changes later. And when we can and when it's possible, just try to insulate exceeding current standards, like consider use of thermal mass and also specify high performance glazings. And another thing for this one is renewable energy. So when there is enough space or there is like plenty of roof area, please consider PV panels as it will contribute a lot in terms of the performance of your building. And the last but also most important, when do you design, please follow up passive design measures, which will include consideration for all the like orientations, optimizing glazing, and external shading to glazing and color selection, material selection, and also the zoning for use. So if you are like more interested into the passive design, you can go to this Your Home website and just go through these informations. This website is very good and it tells all the key points of how we can do a passive design, like design for climate and orientation shading, all this kind of stuff. Okay, after we had talked about energy, then we come to the next part, water. Similar to energy, we have 3 questions here. What are council's requirements and their policy objectives? And what is the key point emitter? And what we could do to achieve the best outcome. As you can see here in this figure, most of the water we used is not drinking water. It's like water we used for laundry, water we used for irrigation, and for toilet flushing. So, in terms of council's requirements and council's policy objectives, it aims to improve the water efficiency and reduce the total operating potable water use. And it encourages the collection of reuse of stormwater and the appropriate use of alternative water sources. It's same with energy. We need to get over 50% score in terms to comply with the BESS requirements. And what is the key point in water here? So the key point here is we need to try recycling water as much as possible. As you can see here, and we already discussed in the previous webinar, the stormwater reuse is very important here. As you can see, we have a rainwater tank which will collect all the roof runoffs and reuse all this rainwater for toilet flushing and for laundry and even for showering. And there's another way, like grey water, we can also use them. When it's approved by council, we can use some of the council treated grey water for irrigation and for laundry, but it needs a very detailed treatment, and there might be some concerns of the healthy issues. So we should be careful here. But the key point of this figure is just to try to recycle your water in your homes. As you can see from top to the end, there's like from least sensitive to most sensitive. So for irrigation, rainwater and grey water, they are both fine. For toilet flushing, yes, we can use rainwater and grey water, but it needs to be treated. Then for car washing, it's both fine, and for washing machine, rainwater is also fine. But after that, for dishwasher, swimming pool, or showers, grey water is kind of like we cannot use grey water. But for rainwater, it still needs to be treated and highly recommend when it's not regular drinking water is available. So what we could do to achieve best outcome in terms of water. First of all, try to use high wells rating water fixtures like shower heads, taps, toilets, and applicants like dishwasher or washing machine. We need to do them to have achieve a high wells rating, and they must be as part of a base build. So another thing is for rainwater reuse. So we need to maximize the reuse of rainwater and use them for toilet flushing, for irrigation and wash down. The other point for water is sometimes the water efficient landscaping is also important. If you can have all the landscaping which is drought tolerance and the native plant, then you can achieve 1 point in terms of water. The last thing is we try to reduce the water use in terms of building systems. The example of that is 5 test water tank or waterless HVAC system. Okay, after that, 2 key categories. There are also other categories which is also very important, and sometimes they are easier to achieve points to get a good performance of your development. So management, for what we can do and what we could do to achieve best outcome in terms of management. One is early commitment to environmental targets. So when you start your project, you should have a very clear understanding of how your project will perform in terms of the ESD part. And another thing is the operation waste separation strategy, which we also will talk about it later in terms of waste management plan. And another thing is regular tuning of all the building service, just to make sure all your building service is at its designed capacity and it all performs well. Smart metering will help to understand the use of your building service and how your heating and cooling loads look like. The last but also very important thing is the preparation of a building user guide. So for this one, it's quite simple. You can just list all the ESD figures you have in terms of your projects. Like you have PV panel installed and like rainwater tank is installed and the toilet flushing water is from rainwater, or all these simple but important things to make people aware of all the ESD initiatives in your building. Transport. So for transport, the most important thing is location. As when you project close to all the public transport, or there's some like convenience store around. But location is not something we can change when your project is there. So other things we can do to achieve, to improve the sustainable of your project is encourage people to use more sustainable transport. So you can have like bicycle facilities here. So remember, if you want to claim points in terms of the BESS, you need to have bicycle facilities, which should be 50% of the planning scheme requirements. And if you have like end of trip facilities, and you have electrical vehicle charging facilities, or you have like car share scheme in your project, it will also help in terms of the BESS transport credits. So waste. For waste, the one thing of waste here we're going to discuss is building reuse. So in terms of most council requirements, right, nowadays they will require your projects to have construction and demolition waste to be reused at least 70% by mass. And for some councils now they increase this 70% to 80%. So this is something we should remember. And the other thing about waste is that we need to have a convenience of recycling. So all the recycling facilities should be as conveniently located as this for general waste. And all this will be discussed more in detail in terms of waste management plan. Urban ecology is also important. It should provide communal space for people gathering for social exchange, and also provide vegetation and landscaping within or around the developments. As you can see in these two figures, they have like green roof and green facade. So in terms of the green roof and green facade, it's not only help in terms of the urban ecology, but it will also help in terms of the cooling and the heating. So last thing, but also very important thing we want to talk about is innovation. So as most people think about innovation, it's something we should do to exceeding the best practice standard. But sometimes it can be also very simple and straightforward. The key point here, as I mentioned before, when you start a project, you should have a good understanding of how your project gonna performance in terms of ESD. Then we can come up with ideas and try different strategies to incorporate all the innovation ideas into the project. So thanks for joining me in this webinar, and if you have any questions, just feel free to contact us, call us, or like email us. And hope you enjoy this webinar, and I'm gonna see you again in next webinar.